Hey beautiful humans, I'm RidersDX and today I'm embarking on a journey to play through every single Harry Potter game known to man. It don't matter how difficult, mind-numbingly terrible, or painful the experience is, I won't stop until every single one of these games will touch my sweaty palms and lips. How you doing, baby? I like a man rough around the edges. But why Harry Potter, you might ask? Originally written in 1997 as a children's novel, this franchise would go on to make billions of dollars in revenue. I mean, it makes you think about how piss poor everyone is in comparison. Wow, only $100K for rent each month? What a bargain! But with every major media franchise also came a video game adaptation, and Harry Potter would go on to have a video game for every single film going forward. I mean, the release of Hogwarts Legacy is basically the equivalent to dying and coming back to life, so we stay graceful. I want to take you on a journey and show you how every single one of these games had led up to one of the most massive RPGs that we've ever seen in our lifetime, starting with a game that needs no introduction.
Hello, Harry, it's me, Hagrid.
So yeah, let's start with Stupid Stone, as it's definitely one of the most major games in this franchise. It originally came out in 2001 with 4 separate versions: a Game Boy Color, a Game Boy Advance, a PC version, and of course the all too famous PS1 version. These games had pretty mixed reception overall, but they did extremely well in sales. In fact, the PS1 version sold 8 million copies, which makes it one of the best-selling PS1 games of all time. So Sorcerer's Stone for the PS1 must have been one hell of an entry, right? I mean, why else would so many people buy a game that wasn't good? Alright, I'm not going to stand here and trash a licensed PS1 game, as that's pretty predictable and not at all entertaining. But what I do want to do is look into this game and kind of see if it really lives up to the title of being one of the best-selling PS1 games of all time. So my perspective on this game is one, I never did get to play it as a child. In fact, Harry Potter in general was very on and off for me. I remember checking out the first book in the library and I stopped reading at like 10 pages because I was like, reading sucks. I'm a kid. I'm gonna go out and lay on the grass or something. But it definitely is a franchise I've grown to love as I gotten older, so I'm pretty excited to check all these games out.
Which reminds me, the 3rd floor corridor is out of bounds to everyone who does not wish to suffer a most painful death.
Okay, first off, Dumbledore looks like a snow cone. Secondly, why is this game immediately threatening you with death in the first few minutes of the game? The game has a pretty simple action-adventure setup. You control Harry as he maneuvers around the castle, completing tasks, attending class, and truly embracing the world of wizardry. Harry controls pretty adequately here and sort of mimics the Legend of Zelda blueprint. He can run, he jumps off of ledges when you run off of them, he has like some buttons for spells. I mean, that's pretty much all you need for this game. Despite this being like a tiny PS1 game though, I couldn't help but feel like Hogwarts was bigger than it led on to be. Though you had a lot of like small rooms and corridors to travel through, it did kind of feel like a maze when I first got in here, and it felt pretty sizably big actually. So that was really cool because they were probably working with like a smaller budget and they probably couldn't make like a huge map, but the way they designed the game makes it seem bigger than it actually is, so kudos to them. I can definitely see this game's appeal. I think I would have loved something like this as a kid. Also, this is like a weird opinion, but Harry Potter is actually mostly mute in this game, which I found to be really interesting. However, it kind of gave me this like weird possessive nature of him. Like, it felt like he was my vessel into this world, and I actually felt like I was playing as myself rather than Harry for a little bit. It's a smaller charm to this game that I surprisingly like really dug. There are other charms to this game though that I didn't find nearly as endearing. For instance, the way that you learn spells in this game is through a rhythm minigame. This is pretty standard, you just click the buttons as the white magic stuff reaches the button. It'd be a fine deviation and all, but the problem is the timing here just feels really off. I'm literally clicking the next button in the sequence as soon as it hit the previous button, because if I click it any sooner than that, it's gonna register it as a mistake, and god, this was so f***ing annoying. It's not a huge deal when you eventually adapt to the timing, but yeah, not a highlight of the game personally. There's also some weird time challenges that you have to do before you get to each class. You have to do some like platforming from point A to point B under a time limit so that you're not late for class, basically. I mean, yeesh, it's bad enough that you have to get up in the morning for class, but now there's physically taxing activity like this under a constrained time limit. I mean, like, being a student sucks at Hogwarts. It's kind of fun, but the only thing is the camera does get in the way, but I mean, it's a 2000s video game. But of course, we cannot forget to mention The flying. We got a pretty simple setup here. Hold X to accelerate, use the directional pad to turn, and yeah, that's it. This will be fine and all, but then you see that the main objective of these missions is to go through all these hoops. And when the hoops require you to change direction pretty rapidly, and the turning in this game itself is really stiff and not very well controlled, yeah, it quickly turns into quite a menace. Like, I don't know, there's something about the camera angle here that makes it look like you're gonna go through a hoop sometimes, but then you realize that you don't. So since there's no reverse button, you have to like turn around, go slightly forward, and then turn back around, and then change the direction to go through the hoop. And this wastes like 10 to 15 seconds, and the teacher usually only gives you like, what, a minute to like 2 minutes to complete these missions. So this is truly one of the most f***ed up things about this game in terms of driving you to insane levels of insanity. No thank you. I'll stick to the ground. Thank you very much. Okay, so I know I said I wouldn't rag on a PS1 game, but I'm an adult, so I can do what I want. Despite all the shit that I talked about though, it's actually a pretty fun game. What's really weird about like my opinion about this game is that I actually love the simplicity of it. So I told you that I'm planning to play through all these different Harry Potter games for this channel, and I've already played through quite a few of them. And a lot of these games I played have like so many like complexities to them. It was almost refreshing to actually play something that's like so simplistic and so to the point, and it's just so easy for anyone to get into. It definitely has an extremely rushed and unpolished feel to it. I think what works for this game though is that they knew that. They knew that this was going to be a very rushed and unpolished project, and so they didn't really try to do too many crazy things with it. And while it's simplistic, it's like kind of fun and charming in a way. I guess it's kind of similar to like watching your nephew take his first steps for the first time. It has that little charm to it like that. It's like, okay, you know that this is a small game, you know that it's not going to be anything too special, but nonetheless you can't help but smile at it and have fun with it. The fact that it's like the very first iteration of Harry Potter in a video game setting, and that it did a decent job at least capturing the feel of it, I mean, I can't help but be a fan of it. It was a fun time. Plus, I have to appreciate how savage Draco is in this game. Like, I would totally be here for a Draco diss album. Like, let's go.
Go home to your mother, Potter. Oh, sorry, you don't have one, do you?
So the success of this game was so great that nearly 2 years later, this game would get another version developed. It would be one for the PS2, GameCube, and Xbox, and it actually gets released after the Chamber of Secrets comes out. And so this game basically got a reimagining 2 years later. Like, that is just insane. The best way to describe this game's gameplay is to think of the Ocarina of Time as well, but with the addition of awkward pre-adolescence. It's very similar to the PS1 game in terms of setup. You control Harry throughout Hogwarts as you complete various tasks throughout the action-adventure setup they have here. There's no jump button here, just like Ocarina of Time, so Harry will just leap off the edge, including to his doom. There's a lock-on mechanic you can target your spells with. And this game also has dungeons. If by dungeons you mean elaborate mazes created by professors so they don't actually have to teach you anything. Yeah, the way you learn spells in this game is that you get to play through all these like very darkly lit dungeons in order to find the spell you're supposed to learn and then use that spell to get out of the dungeon and return back to class. I mean, it certainly takes the concept of learning through experience to the extreme, but if I had to go through these dungeons as a kid, I probably would have begged for homeschooling. And if you know my parents, that's a very impressive feat. At least when you go to learn to fly, there's no like depressing dungeon you have to go to learn how to do it. But the professor itself could be taken the wrong way.
An outstanding display, Mr. Potter. You receive the highest grade, a distinction. Well done. If you want to practice flying, Mr. Potter, come over here.
I mean, come on guys, this is literally the equivalent of a man driving up with a van to a school and offering kids candy if they come into the back door. So just like the PS1 version, I didn't have that blind nostalgia going into this game because I never got to play it, and so the first few hours of this game were challenging to say the least. The controls feel very 2000s movie game-esque. They could just feel very unreliable at times in a game where you need some jumps to just like make it so that you can do some of these like precise platforming challenges that the game throws at you, and sometimes it just doesn't do it for you. Like, give me a double jump button so I can do it myself. I don't want to rely on this like automatic jumping as you run off a ledge. Not to mention the camera is pretty annoying and fixed. I mean, you can move it around the right trigger, but it always like reverts back to where it's supposed to be. Like, it kind of just tries to push you into the direction that it wants you to look at, even though sometimes that direction is not helpful at all in terms of navigating these dungeons. I also do wish there was like another system of swapping out your spells, because this game does let you learn a lot of different spells, but the problem is you don't have enough buttons to use all of them, and so So this game has a system where you get to map the spells to each of the 4 buttons on the right, but then you start learning more than 4 spells. Maybe they could have utilized the directional pad or something to switch out the spells, or even have some kind of spell wheel you can activate with a trigger, instead of having to go into this menu and pause the momentum you might be having in this game just to swap out a spell. All this stuff just makes the dungeons like really drag on, and man, sometimes I wish I could just like skip some of this stuff. For instance, there's this garden near Hagrid that you need to constantly go back to as you learn new spells to collect ingredients for potion class. The game hounds at you over and over again to get these potions for Snape's class, and you know what? Sometimes I just want to let Snape bite my head off, like who gives a shit?
Don't go to potions if you haven't collected all those ingredients, Harry.
Ron is literally blocking my way because I don't have all the ingredients. I will say, despite the hiccups, Harry still feels pretty good to control, and I actually enjoyed a lot of the puzzles that the game throws at you. I just wish visually there was more to distinguish these dungeons. I mean, I know that Hogwarts is like a castle that's really old, but like you couldn't have made the dungeons at least like look a little bit more different between each one, because they all just start blending in together, and I don't even know what point I'm at in the game anymore sometimes. I can't tell you what a relief it was to do a dungeon in herbology and realize it was taking place outside. Like, breath of fresh air. But honestly, just like the PS1 version, this game does hit a sweet spot that I'm sure all Wizarding fans are gonna love about it, and that's if I can run throughout Hogwarts as a Wizarding student. The castle is decently sized and convoluted enough that it does feel very similar to the actual Hogwarts that, you know, despite the emptiness and the little barrenness of the environment, I did enjoy running through it. I definitely got lost more times than I would like to admit, and I wish there was a better system than just like having a character lead you to the next main point of the storyline. I mean, there is a map, but what the f am I looking at? There are things hidden that encourage exploration, which comes down to 2 different collectibles. One of which is this game's currency, which are these beans, which Harry has some very strong opinions on.
Marmalade. Ugh, liver. Fishy. Sardine flavour. Yuck. Grass flavour. Coffee.
There's also these wizard cards, which are just these profiles of wizards in the world. They're not that interesting to me personally, but collecting a certain amount of them does increase Harry's stamina, which the game didn't really make clear at all, so I thought they were completely useless until I realized I gained another bar in stamina when I collected a certain amount, so thank you for the clear-cut communication. One thing I quickly realized about this game is that it probably had at most 6 months of development. Like I said earlier, this game literally has the same exact layout as Chamber of Secrets, which came out like a year before this game, I think. But this game is more barren, empty, and less polished than Chamber of Secrets, which is always something that's gonna confound me because this game came out after Chamber of Secrets. I mean, when I first played this one, I assumed it was before Chamber of Secrets because that makes sense. Like, Chamber of Secrets is just like a better and more polished game in every way compared to this one. But what they literally did with this game was just take Chamber of Secrets, took some stuff out of it, added some basic things to make it match the first movie, and bam. Another route of revenue for the Harry Potter franchise right there. Even though this game is objectively more fulfilling than the PS1 version, I almost have more things I dislike about this one compared to the PS1 version. The PS1 version was the first time the Harry Potter franchise really had to make a game like this, and I sort of respect it for taking that on, and even though it's not like a really impressive game by today's standards, at the time, it probably was like a really decent adaptation of Harry Potter, and that's probably why it did so well. This game was legitimately pumped out as a cash cow. Literally just to give us a somewhat similar game as Chamber of Secrets, but plastered the first movie all over it, and voila. I think because this game tried to do more than the PS1 version, but didn't really succeed at most of it, this game had like much higher highs, but much lower lows than the PS1 version. And that's why like I just couldn't consistently go to this game having a good time, because there'd be some things that I enjoy about it, but then there'd be some things I absolutely detest about it. And I'm just like, man, I definitely had more fun with the PS1 version. I think if you're a major Harry Potter fan, both games definitely have their place. But if you want something more simplistic and more of like an easygoing experience, then the PS1 version is definitely a nice thing to check out. But if you want something that's a little bit more in-depth and kind of follows the movie plot more closely, then this version would be really good to check out as well. At the end of the day, they're both pretty solid Harry Potter experiences, and they both lay a nice foundation for what's to come in the franchise. And yeah, I think I enjoyed my time overall. It was definitely an experience, but I'm looking forward to seeing what Harry Potter takes me from here. Oh, yeah, those other games. Let me go ahead and bring those over to myself. Wingardium Leviosa! Oh, too bad. Those games are destroyed. I guess I have to end the video now. You wanna know where babies come from? What do you mean they're not hatched from eggs in a child garden? By the way, something that's gonna be a reoccurring theme for a little while in these videos is that these characters have an obsession with sleeping, which is honestly the most relatable thing the Harry Potter franchise has ever done. The game is also very dramatic with doors.